Hi, how are you doing?
Good. How about you?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Can you please present yourself and tell me what you do?
Sure. So my name is Joel Telpner. I am an attorney in New York at a law firm called Sullivan Worcester, and I run the firm's fintech and blockchain practice. Called me and said, we just got a call from a client, and they said that they want to be able to issue a security on the blockchain. Can we help them? And I said, let me get back to you tomorrow. And I went home and I Googled what is blockchain. No, but the
Be
next,
careful, that's a
right.
scam.
So the next day, I said, sure, let's talk to the client. So the client came in, and we ended up working with them. It was a company called Overstock, and it was the very first time anybody had issued a security on the blockchain. And it took us almost 2 years to bring that transaction to market, and part of that was because we spent 2 years working with the SEC and FINRA in the United States to get the regulatory approvals. And so since nobody had ever done it before, there were a lot of first-time questions that had to be answered. And by the time that it finally went to market in the fall of 2016, I said, wow, this is like more cool than anything else I've done in a long time, and decided that's what I wanted to spend my time doing.
What was the hardest point? What was the hardest thing at that point?
Well, the technology is so new that even as a lawyer trying to make sure that I understood it, and so the communicating between the tech experts and the legal experts, and then trying to turn around and work with the regulators to get everybody to understand and get everybody on the same page. It was just hard because it's technology that's moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So every time you thought you understood it, it was already changing. But just making sure we were all on the same page and we knew how it worked and what we were trying to accomplish. And so getting up that learning curve, it was hard, but it was fun.
And are you feeling comfortable with the current state of the legislation regarding blockchain?
No, there's a long way to go. But again, remember, this is really radically new technology in many ways. It has a lot of aspects to it that we haven't dealt with before, at least not in, there are not a lot of precedents for it. And so a lot of things in the blockchain space are subject to regulation. A lot of people in blockchain early on said, oh, this is all so new, so different that you can't possibly regulate it. Well, that was dumb. That wasn't true. But the real issue is that a lot of the regulations we do have don't exactly match up with where the technology is. And so, regulators are trying to catch up. They're trying to learn. And the technology at the same time keeps moving forward and, at lightning speed. And so every time we think that we're catching up from a regulatory standpoint, the goal line is moved again.
And what do you think is the most urgent issue to be resolved?
Well, so the biggest challenge the market has is uncertainty. So at times, imperfect regulations are better than no regulation. And so we have a lot of countries, people criticize the U.S. for what's going on there, but we have a lot of countries that are working hard to try to understand the space, trying to put out regulation, trying to get input from the industry. And so it's happening. It's just not at the speed at which, people would like to see it sometimes.
Yes. Yeah, which is completely normal because usually we experience things
It went through the same thing, by the way, when as the internet was developing and rolling out. There were people that said, oh, you can't regulate it. And then the regulations that were coming out, were behind where the internet was. And so we're going through the same thing again.
I would like to know which was the most exciting presentation for you today, which had the biggest impact on you?
So the one that I really, really liked was the one given by the team from Latin America, talking about the projects that they're working on, because we're constantly hearing about things happening in the States and Europe and in Asia.
Yes.
But it was really nice to hear about some really interesting blockchain projects coming out of Latin and South America. So I like that a lot.
And do you think that some parts of the world must get more exposure? And do you think that we can be working on this and you can work in this area to help them?
Well, so that's a great thing about blockchain because, if you look at prior tech cycles, a lot of it was hardware driven, which meant you had to have a lot of capital. Yes. This is much more software driven, and so the great thing about it is that you can have people all over the world working on projects, and you can bring projects to people all over the world. So over time, one of the great things we're doing with blockchain technology are figuring out ways to enable people that haven't had access to financial markets in the past and getting them into the global economy. And so I'd like to see more effort being directed towards like South America and Africa, but it is happening.
Yes. And in your eyes, what is the next thing for blockchain industry in 2020?
So we're going through a little bit of a hangover. After the ICO boom and bust, yes, and the fallout from that, and some of the players out in the market that were not the most scrupulous, we're still dealing with that cleanup. So it's taking a while now for us to move beyond that, but the projects that are coming online now are more sophisticated, are better thought out. Yeah. The players are acting in a more responsible way, and so one of the things that I think that results in that we'll start to see more are not just this being the realm of small startups, but more enterprises looking at how we can use blockchain technology to rethink the way all kinds of business activities are done. And then as part of that, I think we'll see more institutional investor dollars that's been still sitting on the sidelines starting to take a more serious look at blockchain technologies. And so that, I think, will be a healthy maturation of where we are.
Do you sometimes preach blockchain to your family or friends?
You mean do their eyes roll up into the back of their head and say, okay,
yes,
enough
like
already?
It's
yeah, it's like, yes, you're going to tell me that blockchain can cure everything. Absolutely. No matter what the problem is, blockchain will solve it.
This is the solution. And my last question for you is, which is your favorite crypto city?
I live in New York. Of course it's New York.
I'm sorry.
It's New York.
It's like I should have known better.
It is New York. And in all seriousness, while blockchain goes well beyond financial services, I think a big piece of what's happening in blockchain is related to fintech, and New York is such a financial services hub. It's making it also, I think, a very important blockchain hub.
I said that would be my last question.
No,
but
you get one more bonus. Okay, one bonus
round. Thank you very much.
Sure.
All right. Isn't it there the regulation a little bit more strict from the rest of the world? So basically, does that stand in the way?
Well, that's a great question, and I think from a market perception standpoint, it stands in the way. From a market reality standpoint, I don't think it's much more strict than the rest of the world. The way I look, here's the way I would say. Yeah, the U.S. has said a lot of these tokens that were sold are probably really securities. And the world said, oh, that's terrible. Let's find a jurisdiction that's not regulated. But that's the wrong approach. Because if you're an investor in this space, you're investing in crypto, whether we call it a security or something else, you want the people issuing it to act responsibly. You want them to provide some type of disclosure that tells you what you're investing in. You want them to stand behind it. You want the types of safeguards that, whether you call it a security or something else, you want those safeguards in order for this to be a market that functions appropriately and rationally. And the U.S., I think, maybe in a not so perfect way, has been out in front pushing and encouraging that type of maturity into the market, which I think is important. And so people kind of grouse about it and say, oh, the U.S. is so complicated, let's just go somewhere else. But the reality is U.S. capital markets are the biggest in the world because they've got this appropriate oversight and people can invest without having to worry about scam artists and so on. So we need that for this space too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.